I'm Emma, 28, and I'll never forget checking my phone that morning, 1 week before my wedding, and seeing my mother's text explaining why they wouldn't attend. All my life, I'd lived in my perfect sister Jessica's shadow, watching my parents celebrate her every achievement, while mine barely registered. Their obsession with maintaining our family's flawless image meant my choice to marry Ryan, a firefighter from a working-class family, before Jessica's wedding to her lawyer fiancé was unforgivable. Now, 3 years later, their carefully constructed perfect family facade is crumbling, and suddenly they're calling me. Before I share my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt like the black sheep in your family. Let me know in the comments if you've experienced conditional love from parents who cared more about appearances than authenticity. Growing up in our stately colonial home in Brookline, an affluent suburb of Boston, I learned early that our family image was everything to my parents. My father, Michael, was a founding partner at Williams and Carter Law, one of Boston's most prestigious firms. My mother, Catherine, ran a high-end interior design business catering to the city's elite. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family, successful, attractive, and accomplished. But inside our immaculate home, there was an unspoken hierarchy. My sister Jessica, 3 years my senior, occupied the top position. From the moment she brought home her first perfect report card in elementary school, my parents decided she was their golden child, the living embodiment of their success as parents. I can still remember my 10th birthday when I proudly showed my father the blue ribbon I'd won for my science project on renewable energy. He glanced at it briefly and said, "That's nice, Emma," before turning his attention back to Jessica's practice SAT scores. She was 13 then, already being groomed for Harvard, already the focal point of my parents' ambitions. "Your sister has a real gift," my mother would often say, usually within my earshot. "Some people are just born exceptional." Jessica excelled at everything she touched. She was valedictorian, captain of the debate team, concert pianist, and homecoming queen. Each achievement was celebrated with dinner parties and professional photographs that later adorned our living room walls. My own accomplishments, and there were many, seemed to evaporate into thin air. In 7th grade, I won a state-level writing competition. The award ceremony was scheduled on a Saturday afternoon. "We'll be there, sweetheart," my mother had promised. But that morning, Jessica announced she had a last-minute piano recital, just a small performance at her teacher's home studio. Without hesitation, my parents chose to attend her recital instead. "You understand, don't you, Emma?" my mother said, straightening Jessica's hair before they left. "This is important for your sister's college applications." I sat alone at the ceremony, watching other parents beam with pride as their children accepted awards. When my name was called, I heard only scattered applause, no familiar voices cheering me on. Mrs. Henderson, my English teacher, took a photo of me receiving my certificate and later gave me a printout. "Your parents would be proud," she said kindly. I never showed them the photo. Over time, I developed a protective shell of independence. I learned to value my own achievements without needing my parents' validation. I discovered that I could set my own standards for success, ones that had nothing to do with social status or appearance. The only person in my family who seemed to see me, really see me, was my maternal grandmother, Martha. A retired librarian with a wicked sense of humor and a rebellious streak, Grandma Martha had no patience for my parents' status obsession. "You know what I see when I look at you, Emma?" she asked me once when I was 13 and struggling with the invisibility that came with being the second daughter. We were sitting on her porch swing drinking lemonade while my parents and Jessica were at yet another college information session. "What?" I asked. "I see a young woman with fire in her soul," she said, tapping my chest lightly. "Your sister follows paths that others lay out for her, but you, my dear, you'll forge your own way, and that takes a special kind of courage." Grandma Martha became my refuge, the one place I could be fully myself without measuring up to impossible standards. Every Sunday afternoon, I would bike to her small cottage on the edge of town, and we would bake cookies, read books, or simply talk about life. She asked about my dreams, my friends, my ideas, all the things my parents seemed too busy to notice. "Your parents are trapped in a prison of their own making," she told me once. "All this worry about what the neighbors think, what their colleagues think, what the world thinks. It's exhausting, and it blinds them to what's real. At home, the pressure to follow the correct path was constant. The correct path, according to my parents, was clear: attend an Ivy League university, pursue a prestigious career in law, medicine, or finance, marry someone from a good family with the right connections, and produce beautiful, accomplished grandchildren who would continue the legacy. Jessica was following this path to perfection. I, on the other hand, was already showing signs of deviation. I preferred books to social events, questioned authority, and showed an alarming interest in public service careers. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the unspoken question that hung in the air during family dinners, holiday gatherings, and parent-teacher conferences. It was never said outright, but I heard it clearly in every comparison, every sigh, every disappointed look. By the time I reached my senior year of high school, I had made a decision that would set the course for my adult relationship with my parents. Despite having the grades and extracurriculars to apply to Ivy League schools, I chose instead to attend Massachusetts State University on a teaching scholarship. The night I announced my decision, my father's face darkened with disappointment. "Massachusetts State. But you could go anywhere with your grades." "I want to be a teacher, Dad," I explained. "Mass State has one of the best education programs in the country." "A teacher?" My mother's voice was sharp with disbelief. "Emma, be practical. Do you know what teachers earn? How will you maintain any quality of life?" "I'll be happy," I countered. "Isn't that a quality worth having in life?" The resulting argument lasted for days. My parents brought in statistics about career earnings, arranged meetings with their friends in respectable professions, and even threatened to withhold financial support. But I stood firm, bolstered by Grandma Martha's quiet support and my own growing conviction that I needed to live authentically. In the end, they relented, though not without making it clear that they considered this the first major disappointment I had dealt them. Jessica, who had just completed her first year at Harvard, was held up as the example I should be following. "Your sister never makes these kinds of impulsive decisions," my father said during our final argument on the subject. "She understands the importance of building the right foundation for success." What none of us knew then was that this was just the first of many choices I would make that would diverge from my parents' carefully plotted course. Choices that would eventually lead to a wedding day without my family present, and to the surprising reversal of fortunes that would shatter their illusion of perfection. The Massachusetts State University campus felt like freedom after years of living under my parents' exacting standards. The red brick buildings weren't as imposing as Harvard's, where Jessica was thriving, but they welcomed me with a sense of possibility I'd never felt at home. Here, no one knew me as Jessica Williams' little sister. No one had expectations based on my family's reputation. I could simply be Emma. I threw myself into campus life with enthusiasm, joining the student newspaper, volunteering at a local elementary school, and making friends who valued me for myself rather than my family connections. My parents called dutifully every Sunday, but our conversations were brief and perfunctory, focusing mainly on my grades and whether I was applying myself fully. Harvard's pre-law society just elected Jessica as their youngest ever vice president, my mother announced during one such call. "Professor Hartman says she has a brilliant legal mind. Aren't you proud of your sister?" "That's great," I said, automatically, the response worn smooth from years of practice. "Tell her congratulations from me." These updates about Jessica's achievements were constant, subtle reminders of the path I should have chosen. Meanwhile, my own news, making the dean's list, being selected for a competitive teaching internship, was acknowledged with brief, "That's nice, dear" responses, before the conversation inevitably turned back to Jessica. It was during my sophomore year that I met Ryan. Not in some romantic, dramatic fashion, but in the ordinary course of life that sometimes delivers extraordinary results. We were both volunteering at a fundraiser for the local children's hospital. I was face painting. He was helping kids make crafts at the next table over. What struck me first about Ryan wasn't his appearance, though he was certainly attractive with his warm brown eyes and easy smile. It was the way he interacted with the children, patient, engaged, genuinely interested in what they had to say. In a world where I'd grown up feeling invisible, watching someone who truly saw the people around him was magnetic. "You're really good with them," I said during a lull in the activity. He looked up and smiled. My dad always says that kids are just people who haven't learned to hide their feelings yet. Makes them easier to understand than adults, if you ask me. We started talking, and I learned that Ryan was a junior studying fire science. His father and grandfather had both been firefighters in South Boston, and he was planning to follow in their footsteps after graduation. Must be nice, I said, having your family support your career choice. Something in my tone must have given me away, because Ryan tilted his head slightly. I'm guessing yours doesn't. And just like that, I found myself telling this near stranger about my parents' disappointment in my choice to become a teacher, about growing up in Jessica's shadow, about the constant pressure to be someone I wasn't. Instead of the awkward sympathy I expected, Ryan nodded with understanding. My older brother went into investment banking instead of the family tradition. My parents were crushed, even though they tried not to show it. Took them years to accept that he had to follow his own path. That simple acknowledgement, that families could be complicated, that parental expectations could be burdensome, felt like a breath of fresh air. We exchanged numbers at the end of the day, and within a week we were meeting for coffee between classes. Our relationship developed, slowly built on a foundation of genuine friendship and mutual understanding. Ryan came from a world entirely different from mine. His father a career firefighter, his mother a nurse, his childhood spent in a modest triple-decker in South Boston, rather than a stately Brookline colonial. But despite these surface differences, we shared core values, a belief in service to others, a desire for authenticity, and appreciation for simple pleasures. As we grew closer, I introduced Ryan to Grandma Martha, who took to him immediately. "This one sees you," she whispered to me while Ryan helped her wash dishes after dinner. "Hold on to that, Emma. It's rarer than diamonds." Meeting my parents was a different matter entirely. I put it off for months, knowing instinctively that they would judge Ryan based on criteria that had nothing to do with his character or how he treated me. When I finally brought him home for Thanksgiving during our junior year, my intuition proved correct. My mother's smile was polite but cool when I introduced them. "Firefighting," she repeated after Ryan explained his career plans. "How noble and dangerous, I imagine." "It can be," Ryan acknowledged, "but the training is excellent and the brotherhood looks out for each other." "Brotherhood," my father echoed, swirling his scotch. "Interesting choice of words. Rather medieval guild-like, isn't it? Not much room for advancement in such systems." Ryan handled their thinly veiled condescension with grace, never rising to the bait or showing offense. But I could feel my stomach nodding as the evening progressed, especially when Jessica arrived with her new boyfriend Bradley, the son of my father's law partner. The contrast in my parents' reception of the two men could not have been more stark. While Ryan was subjected to polite but distant questioning that highlighted the differences in our backgrounds, Bradley was welcomed with genuine warmth and interest. "Bradley just made law review," my father announced proudly, as though Bradley were already part of the family. "Harvard Law Review, Emma. Very prestigious." "Congratulations," I said sincerely, though I couldn't help noticing that my father had never announced any of my achievements to guests with such pride. Jessica, to her credit, tried to include Ryan in conversations asking about his studies and his family. But the evening's trajectory was clear. Bradley fit the image my parents had for their daughter's partners. Ryan did not. As we drove back to campus that night, I apologized repeatedly for my parents' behavior. "You have nothing to apologize for," Ryan said firmly, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "You're not responsible for their actions." "But they were so obviously comparing you to Bradley, and it wasn't fair. You're worth 10 of him." Ryan chuckled. "I don't know Bradley well enough to say that. He seems like a decent guy. But Emma, what I do know is that your parents' opinion of me doesn't define me. And it shouldn't define us." That simple statement crystallized something I'd been struggling to articulate for years. My parents' opinions, their judgments, their narrow vision of success, none of it had to define me. I had been giving their disapproval power over my choices, even as I rebelled against it. "You're right," I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Their approval isn't something I need anymore." Our relationship deepened after that. Thanksgiving strengthened by the realization that we were choosing each other deliberately, not seeking external validation. We supported each other through final exams, graduation, and the transition into our first professional positions, Ryan as a probationary firefighter and me as a fourth-grade teacher at a public elementary school. Meanwhile, Jessica continued on her prescribed path, excelling at Harvard Law and joining our father's firm after graduation. Her relationship with Bradley progressed along similarly predictable lines, with both sets of parents expressing their approval at every opportunity. During this time, my grandmother's health began to decline. Diagnosed with congestive heart failure, she moved from her beloved cottage into an assisted living facility closer to my parents' home. I visited her every weekend, often bringing Ryan along. During these visits, she shared wisdom that would prove invaluable in the years ahead. "Your parents aren't bad people, Emma," she told me during one such visit. "They're afraid. Afraid of uncertainty, afraid of what others might think, afraid of paths they don't understand." "That doesn't excuse how they treat me," I said, still nursing the hurt from their latest dismissal of my teaching career. "No, it doesn't," she agreed. "But understanding why people behave as they do can help you release some of the pain. Not for their sake, but for yours." She took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong despite her frailty. "Promise me something, Emma. Promise me you'll live authentically even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The approval of others is a poor substitute for being true to yourself." "I promise," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. What I didn't know then was how soon that promise would be tested and how completely my parents would fail their own test of unconditional love. 3 years into our relationship, on a crisp autumn morning, Ryan took me hiking in the White Mountains. The foliage was at its peak, a symphony of red and gold against the clear blue sky. When we reached a secluded overlook, he dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Emma," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I've known since that first day at the fundraiser that you were special. You see the world with such clarity and compassion. You fight for what matters without making a show of it. You've taught me what real strength looks like." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant solitaire diamond. "Will you marry me?" The ring wasn't extravagant, nothing like the massive diamond Bradley would later give Jessica, but it was perfect. Ryan had saved for months on his firefighter's salary to buy it, choosing the stone himself with care. "Yes," I said without hesitation, tears streaming down my face. "Yes, absolutely yes." We spent the rest of the day in a bubble of joy, hiking back down the mountain and celebrating at a small local restaurant. It wasn't until the next morning that the reality of sharing our news with my family began to dampen my happiness. "They'll find something wrong with it," I told Ryan as we drove toward my parents' house. "The ring will be too small, the proposal not elaborate enough, or they'll say we're too young." "We're 25, Ryan pointed out reasonably. "Most people would consider that a perfectly normal age to get engaged." "You don't know my parents," I sighed. "Nothing is ever just good news with them. There's always some way it could be better, more impressive, more Instagram-worthy." Ryan took my hand. "Whatever happens in there, remember, this is about us, not them. Their reaction doesn't change how I feel about you or how you feel about me." My prediction proved painfully accurate. When I announced our engagement, holding out my hand to show the ring, my mother's smile was strained. "Oh, well, this is surprising," she said, examining the ring with a slightly furrowed brow. "It's very simple." My father cleared his throat. "Isn't this rather sudden? You're both still establishing your careers." "We've been together for 3 years, Dad," I pointed out. "And we both have stable jobs that we love." "Yes, but marriage is a major life decision," he continued. "Have you considered waiting a few years, building some financial security first?" The conversation continued in this vein, my parents raising one concern after another, while never quite saying outright that they disapproved. It was their standard approach, not rejecting something directly, but undermining it with doubt and subtle criticism. "We're thinking of next October," I said, pushing forward despite their lukewarm response. A small ceremony, nothing extravagant. October. My mother repeated her tone, making it clear this was another misstep. That's only 8 months away. Quality venues book years in advance, Emma, and October is peak wedding season. We don't want a big production, I explained. Just something intimate with our closest friends and family. My mother exchanged a glance with my father that I couldn't quite interpret. Well, she said finally, I suppose we can make it work, though I'm not sure why there's such a rush. It wasn't until we were leaving that my mother pulled me aside, her voice lowered conspiratorially. Darling, you should know that Bradley has been looking at rings for Jessica. Nothing official yet, but it's coming soon. Perhaps you might consider waiting until after their wedding. Jessica's been dreaming of her big day since she was a little girl, and it would be a shame to overshadow her moment. The implication was clear. Jessica, as the older sister and the family favorite, should be the first to marry. My getting married before her would disrupt the natural order, the perfect narrative my parents had constructed. I'm sorry, Mom, I said, finding strength in the promise I'd made to Grandma Martha. But Ryan and I have set our date. We're getting married in October. The next few months were a masterclass in passive-aggressive behavior from my parents. They didn't outright refuse to help with the wedding planning, but their assistance came with constant suggestions that we postpone, scale back, or reconsider our choices. Then 2 months after our engagement, Jessica called with her own news. Bradley had proposed with a 3-carat diamond ring during a weekend trip to Paris. They were planning a June wedding, 8 months away, but crucially a few months after my planned October ceremony. The contrast in my parents' reactions was stark and painful. While my engagement had been met with reservations and thinly veiled disapproval, Jessica's announcement unleashed unrestrained enthusiasm. My mother immediately began calling wedding planners and booking appointments at exclusive bridal boutiques. My father opened a special wedding account with what he called a proper budget for a proper celebration. Isn't it wonderful? My mother gushed during a family dinner. The Plaza Hotel for the reception, a 10-piece orchestra, and they've already booked a spread in Boston Magazine. As Jessica described her elaborate plans, the designer dress being custom-made, the honeymoon in the Maldives, the 5-tier cake, I felt Ryan's hand squeeze mine under the table, grounding me in the face of this implicit comparison. Your wedding sounds beautiful too, Emma, Jessica offered, perhaps sensing my discomfort. Small and intimate can be really lovely. Yes, my mother added with a tight smile. So practical given your circumstances. The weeks that followed brought increasing pressure to change our wedding date. My mother began with subtle hints. You know, spring weddings are so much nicer than fall ones. The flowers are fresher. Then came more direct appeals. Jessica's wedding is going to be such a major event. Wouldn't it be easier on everyone if yours was the following year? The family could focus on one celebration at a time. When these approaches failed, she tried a new tactic. Emma, be reasonable. Jessica is the older sister. It's traditional for her to marry first. People will talk if you insist on going ahead with your wedding before hers. Let them talk, I replied, my patience wearing thin. I'm not rearranging my life to fit some arbitrary social rule. As our October dates approached, my parents' tactics escalated. Vendor recommendations mysteriously fell through. Family members received conflicting information about our registry. My mother's help with addressing invitations resulted in several key guests' invitations being accidentally lost. Through it all, Ryan remained my rock, never complaining about my family's behavior, never suggesting we give in to make peace. This is our day, he reminded me, not theirs. 1 week before the wedding, I received the text that despite everything I never truly believed would come. Emma, your father and I have tried to be supportive, but a last-minute client emergency requires our presence in Chicago on your wedding weekend. We're devastated to miss it, but I'm sure you understand that these obligations can't be rescheduled. Perhaps this is a sign that waiting would have been wiser. Love, Mom. I stared at the message, reading and rereading it as though the words might rearrange themselves into something less painful. A client emergency that conveniently couldn't be handled by any of the other partners at my father's firm. A devastated mother who couldn't even call to deliver the news personally. When I called, my mother's phone went straight to voicemail. My father's secretary informed me he was in meetings all day. Jessica, when I finally reached her, sounded genuinely distressed but helpless. "I tried to talk to them, Em, I really did," she said, her voice strained. "But they're convinced this is the right thing to do. Something about taking a stand against impulsive decisions and setting boundaries." "Boundaries?" I repeated hollowly. "They're my parents, Jess. This is my wedding day." "I know," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. Bradley and I will be there, I promise." My grandmother Martha, now too frail to attend the ceremony in person, sent a package that arrived the day after my parents' text. Inside was her own wedding ring, a simple gold band engraved with the words, "Love endures," and a letter that brought tears to my eyes. "My dearest Emma," she wrote in her shaky hand, "by now you may have learned that your parents have chosen fear over love, appearances over substance. Their absence is not a reflection of your worth, but of their limitations. Wear my ring as a reminder that true love transcends social conventions and family politics. I will be with you in spirit, so proud of the woman you have become and the man you have chosen. Love always endures even when people fail us. All my love, Grandma Martha." On my wedding day, I walked down the aisle alone, my grandmother's ring nestled beside Ryan's on my finger. The small chapel was filled with friends who had become family, colleagues who had become friends, and Ryan's large, boisterous clan who had welcomed me with open arms from the first moment we met. Jessica and Bradley sat in the front row where my parents should have been. My sister's eyes wet with tears that I chose to believe were happiness for me, mixed with sadness at our parents' absence. As I reached Ryan and took his hands, I realized something profound this moment. This commitment was perfect exactly as it was. My parents' absence, though painful, had also removed the cloud of their disapproval and criticism. For perhaps the first time in my life, I was making a major decision without the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. "You look beautiful," Ryan whispered as we turned to face the officiant. And in that moment, surrounded by people who loved us for exactly who we were, I felt beautiful and free. 3 months after our simple but heartfelt wedding, I stood in the back of St. Bartholomew's Church in New York City, watching my sister become Mrs. Bradley Carter in what the society pages would later call the wedding of the season. The contrast between our ceremonies could not have been more stark. Where Ryan and I had opted for intimate and meaningful, Jessica and Bradley's wedding was a spectacle of wealth and status. The church itself was decorated with thousands of white roses and lilies, their scent almost overwhelming in the enclosed space. Jessica's dress was a custom Vera Wang creation that had reportedly cost more than my entire wedding budget. The guest list included state senators, federal judges, and Boston's social elite. My parents were in their element, greeting guests with practiced charm and basking in the admiration their perfect daughter's perfect wedding was generating. My mother had spent the morning with professional stylists, ensuring her appearance was flawless. My father had splurged on a bespoke suit from London for the occasion. I had debated not attending after the way they had treated us, but Ryan convinced me otherwise. "She's still your sister," he pointed out. "And from what you've told me, she's as much a victim of your parents' expectations as you are, just in a different way." He was right, of course. Jessica had always been kind to me in her way, even if she'd never stood up to our parents on my behalf. And despite everything, I wanted to support her on her important day. What I hadn't expected was how painful it would be to watch my parents perform their loving mom and dad routine for an audience after they had so callously abandoned me on my own wedding day. My mother cried photogenic tears as my father walked Jessica down the aisle. His toast at the reception spoke of unconditional love and the joy of seeing his first daughter married to such an exemplary young man. First daughter, I repeated under my breath, the implication clear. It was as if my wedding had never happened, as if I had ceased to exist in the family narrative. The photographer arranged elaborate family photos, positioning me at the edge of the frame, almost an afterthought. When one of my mother's friends asked why I hadn't had a similar celebration, my mother smiled tightly and said, "Emma preferred something smaller. She's always been more unconventional." During a rare moment alone with my father at the reception, I gathered my courage to address the elephant in the room. "You missed my wedding." I said, simply, no accusation in my tone, just stating a fact. He adjusted his bow tie, not quite meeting my eyes. There was an important client situation that couldn't be delegated. "Was there really?" I pressed. "Or was it because I married before Jessica? Because Ryan isn't from the right background? Because our wedding wasn't going to be featured in Boston Magazine?" A flash of something, guilt perhaps or anger at being challenged, crossed his face. "Some choices have consequences, Emma," he said finally. "You've always insisted on doing things your way regardless of our advice or family traditions. You can't expect us to simply accommodate every impulsive decision." "Marrying the man I love wasn't an impulsive decision," I replied, keeping my voice level despite the hurt and anger building inside me. "And your absence wasn't a consequence of my choices. It was a consequence of yours. Your choice to value appearances over your daughter's happiness." Before he could respond, Jessica appeared radiant in her designer gown. "There you are. Dad Bradley's father is looking for you. Something about a toast with the groomsmen." My father nodded, seemingly relieved by the interruption. "We'll continue this discussion another time, Emma," he said, though we both knew we wouldn't. Later, as Jessica prepared to leave for her honeymoon, she pulled me aside for a private moment. "I'm sorry they weren't there for you," she whispered, hugging me tightly. "I tried to change their minds. I really did." "I know," I said, and I did believe her. Jessica had always been caught in the middle, the perfect daughter who nonetheless had a conscience and genuine affection for her less favored sister. "Maybe now that both weddings are over, things can get back to normal," she suggested hopefully. But as I watched my parents beaming for photographers showcasing their perfect family image while deliberately excluding me from its center, I knew there was no going back to normal. Whatever relationship we had going forward would have to be built on new terms, terms that respected my dignity and acknowledged the harm they had done. On the drive home from New York, Ryan and I talked about the future and the kind of family we wanted to create, one built on acceptance, honesty, and unconditional love. "Our children will never doubt that they are loved for exactly who they are." I promised, thinking of the years I'd spent trying to earn my parents' approval. "They'll never be measured against some impossible standard or compared to their siblings." "No, they won't," Ryan agreed, reaching over to take my hand. "They'll be secure in the knowledge that they are enough exactly as they are." In that moment, I made a decision that would shape the next chapter of my life. I would maintain minimal contact with my parents, protecting myself from their toxic standards while leaving the door open for a healthier relationship if they ever chose to walk through it. I would focus on building my life with Ryan, on being the best teacher I could be for my students, and on honoring the wisdom Grandma Martha had shared with me. Little did I know that fate had other plans, plans that would force my parents to confront the fragility of their perfect family image and bring us all to a reckoning none of us expected. Life with Ryan unfolded in ways that felt both ordinary and miraculous. We settled into a comfortable rhythm in our modest colonial-style home in a middle-class neighborhood. Nothing like my parents' Brookline mansion, but perfect for us. Ryan continued his work with the fire department, eventually being promoted to lieutenant. I thrived in my elementary school classroom, finding deep fulfillment in helping young minds discover their potential. 2 years after our wedding, I discovered I was pregnant. The mixture of joy and anxiety I felt was complicated by the state of my relationship with my parents. We still saw each other at major holidays and occasional family gatherings, but our interactions remained strained and superficial. My mother asked polite questions about my teaching career, but never really listened to the answers. My father discussed sports and weather as though we were casual acquaintances rather than father and daughter. After much discussion with Ryan, I decided to share the pregnancy news with them in person. I still held out hope that a grandchild might soften their hearts, might help bridge the chasm that had formed between us. We arranged to meet for lunch at a neutral restaurant away from the loaded atmosphere of their home. I waited until dessert before making my announcement, trying to gauge the right moment in their stream of updates about Jessica and Bradley's flourishing careers. "I have some news," I said during a lull in the conversation. "Ryan and I are expecting a baby. I'm about 10 weeks along." My mother's face registered surprise, followed by what appeared to be genuine pleasure. A baby. How wonderful, Emma. When are you due? Early June, I replied, relieved by her positive reaction. June is a lovely month for a baby, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Have you thought about names yet? Family names are always a nice tradition. My father offered congratulations as well, though with less enthusiasm. Children are a big responsibility, he noted. I hope you've considered the financial implications, especially on your salaries. It wasn't the unreserved joy I might have hoped for, but it was better than I had feared. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to imagine a thawing in our relationship, a new chapter centered around their grandchild. That illusion was shattered a month later when Jessica announced her own pregnancy. The contrast in my parents' reactions was like a painful echo of their responses to our respective engagements. Where my news had been met with pleasant but measured congratulations, Jessica's pregnancy was treated as nothing short of miraculous. My mother immediately began planning an elaborate baby shower at the country club. My father started researching the most prestigious preschools in Boston, talking about getting the baby on waiting lists before he's even born. We always knew Jessica would make a wonderful mother, my mother gushed during a family dinner. She has such natural maternal instincts. I exchanged a glance with Ryan, who subtly shook his head silently, urging me not to react to the implied comparison. It was their pattern after all. Jessica the natural, the perfect, the effortless success. Emma the afterthought, the less than, the one who had to work harder for less recognition. When my daughter Lily was born on a warm June morning, Ryan's parents arrived at the hospital within hours, bearing flowers, homemade meals for the freezer, and boundless excitement about their first grandchild. My parents sent an expensive silver rattle and a formal card, but didn't visit until Lily was 3 days old, and then only for a brief 30 minutes between other appointments. She's beautiful, my mother acknowledged, holding Lily somewhat awkwardly. She has the Williams chin, don't you think, Michael? Oh yes, I suppose she does, my father replied, glancing up briefly from his phone. They left shortly after citing a dinner reservation they couldn't miss. The silver rattle remained in its box, eventually donated to a charity auction. What Lily needed wasn't expensive gifts, but grandparents who were present, who delighted in her existence, who made her feel special and loved. When Jessica's son Alexander was born 2 months later, my parents transformed into different people entirely. They canceled meetings to be at the hospital throughout Jessica's labor. They visited daily during her first week home. My father proudly carried around photos of Alexander to show colleagues and friends. My mother arranged a rotation of housekeepers and meal deliveries to help Jessica and Bradley adjust to parenthood. It's different with Jessica, Ryan observed one evening as I nursed Lily, trying not to cry over yet another canceled visit from my parents. She allows them to control the narrative. Her marriage, her career, her child. They're all extensions of your parents' perfect family image. Our life together doesn't fit their script, so they don't know how to relate to it. His insight was profound and liberating. I wasn't being rejected for who I was. I was being sidelined because I refused to play my assigned role in their carefully constructed fantasy. As the months passed, I made peace with the limited relationship my parents seemed capable of having with me and my daughter. Ryan's family more than compensated with their boundless love and regular presence in our lives. I built a network of close friends who became Lily's honorary aunts and uncles. We created our own traditions, our own definition of family, that had nothing to do with social status or appearances. Grandma Martha had left me her cottage and her will, along with a letter that I read often in those early days of motherhood, when I felt the absence of my parents most keenly. Family is more than blood, she had written. It's a choice we make every day, to see each other, to accept each other, to support each other through life's joys and sorrows. Some people, even parents, aren't capable of making that choice. Their loss, my darling girl, not yours. Fill your life with those who choose you day after day exactly as you are. I took her words to heart, focusing on building a home filled with laughter, authenticity, and unconditional love. Ryan and I welcomed our son Noah a year after Lily was born, completing our family in ways that felt perfect to us, regardless of what my parents might think. Holiday gatherings became exercises in emotional management with my parents, lavishing attention on Jessica's children while barely acknowledging mine. Jessica tried in her way to bridge the gap, encouraging her son to play with his cousins, commenting on how smart Lily was, how strong Noah was becoming. "Your children are wonderful, Emma," she told me sincerely during one such gathering. "They're so confident and happy. You're doing an amazing job with them." Coming from Jessica, who had never known what it was to be the less favored child, the compliment meant more than she could know. "Thanks, Jess," I said. "That means a lot." What none of us realized during those carefully choreographed family events was that beneath the surface of Jessica's seemingly perfect life, cracks were beginning to form, cracks that would soon widen into chasms that not even my parents' influence and money could conceal. 3 years into parenthood with Lily, now a precocious 3-year-old, and Noah, a curious 1-year-old, I received an unexpected call from Jessica. We spoke occasionally, usually about family gatherings or brief updates on the children, but rarely had deep conversations. "Emma, are you busy right now?" Her voice sounded strained, lacking its usual confident polish. "Just finishing up some lesson plans," I replied, immediately concerned. "Is everything okay?" There was a long pause, then a shaky intake of breath. "Not really, no. Could we maybe meet somewhere? Just the two of us?" We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. When Jessica arrived, I barely recognized her. My normally immaculate sister looked exhausted, her designer clothes slightly rumpled, her hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail instead of her usual perfect blowout. "Thanks for coming," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I didn't know who else to talk to." "What's going on, Jess?" I asked gently. She stared down at her untouched coffee for a long moment before answering. "My marriage is falling apart," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Bradley's been having affairs. 3 that I know of, probably more." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Oh, Jess, I'm so sorry." "That's not even the worst part," she continued, tears welling in her eyes. "He's been mismanaging money. A lot of money, both clients' funds and our own." The gravity of what she was saying hit me. Bradley wasn't just any lawyer. He was a partner at our father's prestigious firm, handling high-profile clients and their substantial assets. "Have you told Mom and Dad?" I asked, already guessing the answer. Jessica shook her head. "I can't. Dad would be devastated. The firm's reputation. It would destroy everything he's built." "Jess, this isn't something you can hide," I said gently. "If Bradley's mishandling client funds, that's not just a marital issue, it's a legal one." "I know," she whispered. "I know that logically, but every time I think about telling them, I freeze. They've always been so proud of me, of my perfect life. How do I tell them it's all been a lie?" The irony wasn't lost on me. Jessica, the golden child, had been carrying her own burden of impossible expectations. "How long have you known?" I asked. "About the affairs, almost a year. About the money. That's more recent. I found some documents he'd tried to hide." She took a shaky breath. "The thing is, Emma, I've been pretending everything is fine. At family dinners, social events, even in our Christmas cards, I've been maintaining this facade of the perfect marriage, the perfect family." "Why?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Because that's what we do, isn't it? That's what we were taught. Appearances matter more than reality. The Williams family doesn't have problems, we have situations that are managed discreetly." She laughed bitterly. "God, I sound just like Mom." "You're not Mom," I said firmly. "And you don't have to handle this alone, Jess. The crazy thing is," she continued as if she hadn't heard me, "I've always envied you." "Me?" I couldn't hide my surprise. "Why would you envy me?" "Because you're free," she said simply. "You made choices based on what you wanted, not what was expected. You married a man who genuinely loves you, not someone who looks good in family photos. Your children are happy and secure, not props in some performance of perfect parenthood." I was stunned by her admission. All these years I'd assumed Jessica was content with her golden child status, with the path our parents had laid out for her. It hasn't been easy, I acknowledged. The price of that freedom was losing Mom and Dad's approval. Was it worth it? She asked, her eyes searching mine. Yes, I answered without hesitation. It was. We talked for hours that day, really talked perhaps for the first time as adults. Jessica shared the details of Bradley's betrayals, not just the affairs and financial mismanagement, but the emotional neglect, the subtle undermining of her confidence, the growing isolation as she tried to maintain their perfect image. I need to leave him, she concluded finally, for my sake and for Alexander's. But I'm terrified, Emma. I don't know how to fail. I've never been allowed to fail. This isn't failure, I told her firmly. This is courage, and you won't be doing it alone. As we prepared to leave, Jessica hugged me tightly. Thank you, she whispered, for listening, for not judging. I've been a terrible sister to you, Emma. All those years when Mom and Dad treated you unfairly, I never stood up for you. I was so afraid of losing their approval that I became complicit in hurting you. You were trapped in their expectations just as much as I was, I replied, just in a different way. Still, I'm sorry, and I want you to know I've always been proud of you, of your strength, your integrity, your willingness to live on your terms. Her words healed something in me I hadn't realized was still broken. The little girl who had always wondered if her sister secretly agreed with their parents' assessment of her worth. We made plans to meet again soon with Jessica, promising to consult a lawyer about her options. What neither of us anticipated was how quickly the situation would escalate beyond our control. 2 days later, I received a frantic call from Jessica. It's happening, she said, her voice tight with panic. The firm has discovered irregularities in Bradley's accounts. Dad knows. The news broke publicly the following day. Bradley Carter, partner at the prestigious Williams & Carter law firm, was under investigation for embezzlement and fraud. The amounts involved were staggering, millions of dollars siphoned from client accounts over several years. My phone rang that evening with a call from my father, the first time he had initiated contact with me in nearly 2 years. Your sister needs you, he said without preamble, his voice rough with strain. This situation with Bradley, it's worse than we thought. Jessica is devastated. I know, Dad, I replied. We've talked. There was a pause, as if this information surprised him. You have? Yes, she came to me a few days ago. She already knew about some of Bradley's activities. Another pause, longer this time. I see. Well, your mother and I are doing everything we can to manage this situation. The firm has excellent lawyers who will handle the legal aspects. The main concern now is controlling the narrative in the press and supporting Jessica through the divorce proceedings. Controlling the narrative? I repeated, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Of course that's the priority. Emma, this is serious, he snapped. This scandal could destroy our family's reputation. Everything I've built over decades could be ruined. What about Jessica? I asked. Is anyone concerned about what she's going through emotionally? Or are you just worried about how her divorce will look in the society pages? That's unfair, he protested, though his tone lacked conviction. Of course we're concerned about Jessica. Dad, she's been living a lie for years, trying to maintain this perfect image you and Mom value so much. She knew about Bradley's affairs long before the financial issues came to light, but she was too afraid of disappointing you to say anything. His silence told me my words had hit home. Jessica and Alexander are welcome to stay with us, I continued more gently. Ryan and I have already discussed it. They shouldn't be alone right now, and our home is far enough from Boston to give them some privacy from the media attention. That's very generous of you, my father said, sounding genuinely surprised. I'll let Jessica know. After we hung up, I sat staring at the phone, processing the surreal turn of events. The perfect family image my parents had cultivated so carefully was crumbling before their eyes. Their golden daughter was facing public scandal and divorce. Their son-in-law was potentially heading to prison. The prestigious firm that bore my father's name was entangled in a case that would make headlines for months to come. And in the midst of this crisis, they had reached out to me, the daughter they had deemed not good enough, whose wedding they had skipped, whose children they barely acknowledged. There was a bitter irony in it that I couldn't ignore. But alongside that bitterness was something unexpected compassion. Not for my parents' wounded pride or damaged reputation, but for the emptiness of the value system they had built their lives around. All those years of prioritizing appearances over authenticity status, over happiness, had led them here, to a perfect facade that was collapsing under the weight of its own hollowness. 3 days later, Jessica arrived at our doorstep with Alexander and enough luggage for an extended stay. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, but there was also a new resolve in her expression that I hadn't seen before. "Thank you for this," she said as Ryan helped bring in her bags. "I couldn't stay in Boston another day." The reporters, the whispers, Mom's constant concern about what to tell people. "You don't have to explain," I assured her. "Stay as long as you need to. We have plenty of room." That night, after the children were in bed, the three of us sat in our living room, Jessica clutching a glass of wine like a lifeline as she shared the full extent of the situation. Bradley was facing serious charges that would likely result in prison time. The firm was in damage control mode with my father working around the clock to reassure clients and prevent a mass exodus. "The worst part is how much Mom and Dad care about what people are saying," Jessica confessed. "Dad's more worried about the firm's reputation than the fact that his daughter's marriage is over. And Mom keeps talking about how we need to present a united front and manage the optics, as if that's what matters right now." "That sounds exactly like them," I said, sharing a knowing look with Ryan. "It does, doesn't it?" Jessica gave a hollow laugh. "You know, living here with you these past few days, seeing how you and Ryan are with each other with your kids, it's made me realize how artificial my life has been. Everything was about maintaining this perfect image, this illusion of success. But there was no substance to it." "It's not too late to change that," Ryan pointed out kindly. "You're still young. You can rebuild your life on your terms now." "That's what scares me," Jessica admitted. "I don't know who I am outside of the role I've been playing. Perfect daughter, perfect wife, perfect mother. Without those labels, who am I?" "You get to figure that out," I told her. And speaking from experience, it's terrifying, but also incredibly liberating. The weeks that followed brought a strange new dynamic to our family. Jessica slowly began to relax in our home, shedding the polished veneer she had maintained for so long. She played on the floor with the children, laughed without restraint, and even helped with household chores, something I suspect she had rarely done in her own perfectly maintained home with its staff of cleaners and cooks. Alexander blossomed in the company of his cousins, becoming less the carefully groomed little gentleman and more a normal, rambunctious 4-year-old. The change in him was remarkable, from a child who seemed perpetually anxious about making mistakes to one who embraced the messy, joyful chaos of genuine childhood. My parents visited twice during this period, clearly uncomfortable in our modest home, but making an effort for Jessica's sake. My mother brought designer clothes for Alexander and organic food baskets that nobody asked for. My father spoke in hushed tones about legal strategies and damage control. During their second visit, I overheard a conversation between my mother and Jessica that revealed just how deeply entrenched their value system was. "Darling, you know you don't have to stay here indefinitely," my mother was saying. "We've prepared the guest suite at our house. It's much more suitable." "I'm comfortable here, Mom," Jessica replied. "Emma and Ryan have been incredibly supportive." "Yes, it's very nice of them to take you in during the emergency," my mother acknowledged. "But surely you don't want to impose long-term. And this neighborhood, well, it's not what you're used to." "That's exactly why I need to be here," Jessica said with unexpected firmness. "I've spent my entire life in a bubble of privilege and appearances. Look where that got me, married to a man who saw me as a convenient prop in his own success story." "Bradley made terrible mistakes," my mother conceded. "But that doesn't mean you need to abandon everything about your life. Your position in society, your connections, these things still matter, Jessica." Do they really?" Jessica's voice had risen slightly. "Because from where I'm sitting, those things seem pretty meaningless compared to having a sister who welcomes me without judgment," a brother-in-law who treats me with respect, and niece and nephew who don't care what designer I'm wearing or what country club I belong to. I moved away from the door, not wanting to eavesdrop further, but feeling a profound sense of vindication. Jessica was finally seeing through the illusion that had defined our childhood and shaped our adult lives so differently. The real breakthrough came unexpectedly during a Sunday dinner about a month after Jessica had come to stay with us. My parents had driven down for the day, bringing news about the ongoing legal proceedings and social fallout from Bradley's actions. "The Prestons have uninvited us from their annual gala," my mother reported glumly, "after 20 years of attendance. And Caroline Matthews crossed the street yesterday to avoid talking to me at Whole Foods." "That must have been difficult for you," I said, trying to keep the sarcasm from my voice. My father shot me a warning look. "This situation affects all of us, Emma. The family name has been tarnished." "Has it?" I challenged gently. "Or has the illusion of perfection been tarnished? There's a difference." "This isn't the time for your philosophical musings," my mother said dismissively. "We're dealing with a real crisis here." "Actually," Jessica interjected, "I think Emma has a point. We've spent our whole lives worrying about appearances, about what other people think. But when I really needed support, when my marriage was falling apart long before the financial issues came to light, where was all that concern? You were more worried about maintaining the image of my perfect marriage than about whether I was actually happy in it." My parents stared at her in shock. Jessica had never spoken to them this way before. "That's not true," my father protested. "We've always wanted what's best for you." "No," Jessica countered, her voice steady. "You've wanted what looks best. There's a difference there too." "I don't understand where this is coming from," my mother said, glancing accusingly in my direction. "Has Emma been filling your head with these ideas?" "Emma has been showing me what a healthy family actually looks like," Jessica replied. "One where people are valued for who they are, not what they achieve or how they appear to others." The conversation that followed was painful but necessary. Years of unspoken resentments and misplaced priorities laid bare. Jessica spoke of the pressure she had felt to be perfect, the fear of disappointing them that had kept her in an unhappy marriage. I shared how their conditional love had shaped my sense of self-worth, how their absence at my wedding had confirmed my lifelong suspicion that I would never be good enough in their eyes. My parents listened with varying degrees of defensiveness and discomfort. My father retreated into logical arguments about family traditions and parental authority. My mother alternated between dismissing our concerns and becoming tearful at the suggestion that she had been anything less than a loving mother. But something shifted that day. A crack in the foundation of their certainty, a first glimpse of recognition that their perfect family narrative had exacted a terrible price from both their daughters. As they prepared to leave, my mother paused to watch Lily and Alexander playing together in the backyard, their laughter floating through the open window. "They seem so free," she observed quietly. "They are," I confirmed. "They're allowed to be exactly who they are." She turned to me, then really looking at me perhaps for the first time in years. "Your home is lovely, Emma. Not what I would have chosen, but it's warm, happy." It wasn't an apology or even a full acknowledgement of past wrongs, but it was a beginning, a small crack in the perfect facade that had stood between us for so long. In the months that followed, our family began a slow, often awkward process of reconstruction. Jessica filed for divorce and moved into a modest apartment near our home, wanting to stay close for Alexander's sake. She took a position teaching legal ethics at a local college, a career move that baffled my parents but seemed to bring her genuine satisfaction. Bradley eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges, receiving a 5-year prison sentence that sent shockwaves through Boston's legal community. My father's firm survived the scandal, though not without significant damage to its reputation and client base. The country club memberships and social invitations that had once seemed so crucial to my parents' identity dwindled, forcing them to reevaluate what truly mattered in their lives. 6 months after Jessica had arrived on our doorstep, my parents asked if they could come for a weekend visit. Not just a brief Sunday dinner, but an actual stay, something they had never done before. Are you sure about this? Ryan asked as we prepared the guest room. You don't have to say yes just because they asked. I know, I assured him, but I think they're trying, and I want to give them that chance for the kids' sake if nothing else. Their arrival was stilted, my mother bringing unnecessary hostess gifts, my father carrying their luggage with the air of a man entering foreign territory. But as the weekend progressed, small moments of genuine connection began to emerge. My father spent Saturday morning helping Ryan build a treehouse for the children, returning to the house sweaty and smiling in a way I hadn't seen since I was very young. My mother sat on the floor playing board games with Lily, seeming to forget for a while about her designer clothes and perfect hairstyle. That evening, after the children were in bed, we sat on the back porch, the adults sharing wine under the stars. Jessica had joined us for dinner, completing the family circle. I've been doing a lot of thinking, my father said suddenly, breaking a comfortable silence, about the ways I may have contributed to the problems in our family. My mother tensed beside him, but he continued. When you girls were growing up, I had very clear ideas about success, about the right path in life. I thought I was guiding you toward happiness, but I was really just imposing my own narrow vision. He looked at me directly. Emma, I owe you an apology. Missing your wedding was unforgivable. I let my pride and my rigid expectations stand in the way of one of the most important days of your life. Tears sprang to my eyes, the simple acknowledgement healing a wound I had carried for years. And Jessica, he continued, turning to my sister. I put so much pressure on you to be perfect that you couldn't come to us when your marriage was falling apart. You suffered alone because you were afraid of disappointing us. No child should ever feel that way. My mother reached for his hand, her own eyes glistening. We made mistakes, she admitted quietly. Terrible mistakes. We were so focused on how things looked that we lost sight of what really matters. Which is, I prompted gently. Love, she said simply. Not the conditional kind we've been offering, but real love that accepts and supports without judgment. She looked around at our small gathering. This, family, being together not because it looks good in Christmas photos, but because we actually want to be together. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Years of hurt and misunderstanding couldn't be erased in a single weekend, but it was a beginning, a foundation on which we could build something new and more authentic. Over the next year, my parents became regular visitors to our home. They made efforts to connect with their grandchildren, learning their personalities and preferences, rather than treating them as extensions of their parents. My father took early retirement, stepping back from the firm to focus on family and personal interests he had long neglected. My mother scaled down her design business and began volunteering at a women's shelter, finding unexpected fulfillment in helping others rebuild their lives. Jessica flourished in her new role as a professor, her experiences giving her unique insight into the ethical challenges facing the legal profession. Alexander grew close to his cousins, the three children forming a tight bond that helped him navigate the complex emotions surrounding his father's absence. At Lily's 5th birthday party, I watched my mother helping her granddaughter open presents, genuinely delighting in the child's excitement. My father was across the yard, patiently teaching Noah how to cast a fishing line into the small pond behind our house. Jessica sidled up beside me, following my gaze. Who would have thought we'd end up here? She mused. The perfect family image finally crumbled and something real grew in its place. Something better, I agreed. Do you think you've forgiven them? She asked quietly. I considered the question carefully. I'm working on it, I said honestly. Not forgetting, but forgiving. They did the best they could with the values they had. Now they're learning new ones. Thanks to you, Jessica pointed out. You were the one who stood your ground, who showed there was another way to live. If you hadn't been so brave in choosing your own path, I might never have found the courage to leave Bradley to rebuild my life on my terms. We helped each other, I corrected her. Your crisis became a catalyst for healing all of us. As the party continued around us, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. The pain of rejection, the struggle for self-worth, the courage to live authentically, even when it meant disappointing others. All of it had led here to this imperfect but genuine family gathering. My parents would never be the warm, demonstrative parents I had longed for as a child. My relationship with Jessica would always bear the scars of our unequal upbringing. But we were learning, all of us, how to see each other clearly and accept each other fully, without the distorting lens of expectations or appearances. In the end, it wasn't about creating a perfect family image, but about embracing our perfect imperfections, the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of being human together. If you've struggled with family expectations or felt like you didn't measure up to an impossible standard, know that you're not alone. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more authentic family stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose your own path. Thank you for listening, and remember, true family accepts you exactly as you are, no perfect image required.